March 11th, 1824, as we approach that date, that date is the date that the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, was founded by John C. Calhoun, and that will be almost 100 years. Oh, 1824, 1924, 200 years, excuse me. Did my math add up right? But 200 years since the formation of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I'm doing that to keep my mom. Excuse me about that. But the point I wanted to make about this, since it was founded in 1824, the Bureau, though it has gone through many transformations, because when it was founded in 1824 by John C. Calhoun, it was actually under the War Department at that time. And because at the time there was not really a Department of Interior, there was a very quasi form of Department of Agriculture, and many of the departments at that time were very small or non-existent at the time. And your main ones, the Department of Treasury, uh, Department of State, and also uh, Secretary of State. I mean, Secretary of War, Department of State, Treasury Department. So it really wasn't like the Department of Education, like we have so many departments as we do today. But the point of this point is this will occur on March 11th, and we're approaching because today is the uh, um, of that day where we took and we uh, forced Native people off their reservation uh, or off their lands and put them on reservations. And it was a policy that still exists today because even though many probably in the BIA would say that yes, we have transformed and we have made a lot of changes, the point is this was the system of reservations was the the premise was to force Native American or indigenous people off their normal lands or off their native lands and had those lands available for white European to settle and to farm. And remember, part of this becomes the Jeffersonian ideal of the 19th century of 40 acres and a mule or having an agrarian society from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And this ideal of this yeoman class where they would agriculture and create farming and create self be self sufficient. But the downside of this was they forced people that lived many centuries on these lands off the lands and into areas that they had no inkling to. Additionally, as time goes on, we're talking about 1824, March 11th, 1824, by within 10 years, we have the Indian Removal Acts and etc., forcing more, which at the time the Indian Removal Act was upheld by the courts, but Supreme Court Justice Marshalls. And in essence, Andrew Jackson did not follow the Supreme Court's decision and still forced many of the tribes, especially the Cherokee and the five civilized tribes in the southeast, off their lands and moved them west of the Mississippi. So when we think about this Bureau of Indian Affairs, we have to reconsider, though this might have been uh, uh, ideal situation for white European settlement at the time. It was a bad ideal in the long run because the goal was the goal or the consequence of this is you get hopelessness, mistreatment of many Native Americans, a large amount of death occurs, And the situation even gets worse as we go on into the 19th century with the removal of the bisons. Remember, folks, well, I've talked about this before. When you think about this, we had over 500 million bison in the 19th century, and by the early 20th century, we only have 100 bison left in the United States. This is part of Grant's situation called the Indian problem, take away the food resource and the the ceremony of the buffalo, and force Native American people to into subdue reservation life. And then actually, what this would do is lose would lose their identity, though they would, still fight every step of the way, and still fight every step of the way to now. It's um, a travesty in itself, and and I've always said, and I still believe today. I hear African Americans talk about slavery, removal of Native Americans off their lands, and forced settlements west of the Mississippi is far worse than what occurred with Black African American people, because at least African Americans were housed somewhat and were fed. In this case, a lot of these Native Americans were not housed. They were forced in very um, harsh conditions. Many would suffer and die, especially during the Trail of Tears. And many would face hostilities from the War Department. Remember, at this time, like I said, the Native American tribes were not under the guidance of the Interior Department, but under the War Department. And like I said, this occurred in 1824, March 11th, under John C. Calhoun. So we have to remember that what occurred was a more form of, I call it a new form of slavery, but it was a lot more hostile to the Native American. And remember, Jefferson used to call these Native Americans or indigenous people noble savages. And then, as we see throughout history, especially the 14th, 15th, 16th century, it is the English who dehumanized the Native American culture. And part of this occurs out of the fact of the of the subjection uh, Ireland, and the fact that the British and the British rulers of the time and in the monarchy dehumanized the Irish race, and this proceeds when the English come to the United States, settle on the East Coast, and start their westward movement. And we see that how the different aspects of the French, and a good movie to watch about this is Black Robe, is that the French would live among the Native American or indigenous people. The Spanish would also create what pueblos or communities, but they both the French as well as the Spanish would try to convert them over to Catholicism, and part of this issue becomes my issue, or not my part of my heritage, because my great great grandmother comes from Seminole, and then is moved from the Dolls to eastern parts of Indianapolis, and is forced to in schools, in Catholic schools, and this ensues into the fact that developed Catholicism, and that's how part of my heritage becomes me being a Catholic, is the fact that my great great grandmother was Christianized by the Dawes Act, and the issue becomes you're talking about somebody who was 15, 16 years old, maybe as young as 14, leaving her family and coming to an area east of Indiana, and because of the Dawes Act of the 1880s. So, but this is not about the Dawes Act. I've talked about the Dawes Act before, but I'm talking about the reflection of John C. Calhoun and his infamous wisdom of creating the Bureau of Indian Affairs on March 11th of, like I said, of 1824. And we're approaching the 200th anniversary of that. So, and that shows you how much uh, hostility, bitterness exists between Native American and white European culture at the time. And remember, at this time, we're talking about, manifest destiny, it's white European settlement. And even though all this is uh, uh, wrong in itself, it's just the fact that as a society, we saw these things, and now we have to rectify and move things more in a positive way. And that's why I said the BIA in itself has a bad taste in itself, and we need to move on from the BIA and create more of an autonomy. Because, like I said, is if you study Native American history, the BIA is kind of like, and I don't want to use the analogy, but it is almost like a form of World War II or Hitler in a sense, because the people, uh, um, more or less, I don't know, I should say they are people, but the indigenous people see this more of a force of uh, uh, encampment, necessarily, not necessarily a form of self autonomy and self motivation, which we really need. So that's why my understanding with the BIA, it's one of my other reasonings too, that we need to look at this since it's obsolete and the terminology on this is beyond the realm of many modern white European people, descendants, and understanding of this. Anyway, these are just some food for thoughts. Um, anyway, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow this channel. I'm trying to move things forward. So anyway, please like and subscribe. I do have books available. They're on Amazon. So the latest one is Water Quality on the Reservation, which I made in October of last year. And feel free to reach out to me at bthomasmillerpsych@gmail.com. Anyway, talk to you real soon and have a great day. Bye.